The rain beat against the steel roof of the naval hangar like a slow, heavy war drum. The rain tapped against the steel roof of the naval hangar like a slow war drum. The night smelled of salt and oil, and inside, rows of Navy SEALs stood silent. At the front was Captain Darius Kane, a man who didn't waste words, a man who had buried too many friends. "This isn't a drill," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. On the screen behind him, satellite images of a hostile compound flashed into view. Hostages, heavy weapons, anti-air defenses. It looked like a fortress. "One mistake," Kane continued, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his men, "and everyone dies." He let that sink in. The weight of it settled in the hangar. Then he asked a question no one expected. "Any combat pilots here?" Men shifted uncomfortably. They were SEALs, snipers, divers, demolition experts, the best of the best on the ground and in the water. But pilots, that wasn't their job. The silence stretched. Then, from the back, someone stood. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a single figure rising. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hale. For months, she'd been working in logistics. Quiet, invisible, mostly forgotten. "I am," she said, her voice clear and steady. A few men smirked. She didn't look like their idea of a combat pilot. She was an administrator, a paper pusher. Kane's eyes narrowed, studying her for a long moment. "You?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his tone. "Yes, sir," she replied, unflinching. "F-18, Super Hornet, 127 combat missions. Carrier landings under fire." The room froze. The smirks vanished. 127 combat missions. That was more than a number. It was a lifetime of experience, packed into a few words. The air in the hangar shifted from doubt to respect. Kane didn't hesitate. "You're coming with us." Hours later, the ocean was a black, churning void beneath the SEALs' boats as they cut through the waves. High above them, moving like a ghost against the moonless sky, was Sarah's jet. Inside the cockpit, her hands were steady on the controls, her focus absolute. But her past wasn't as calm. 2 years ago, a mission gone wrong. Her wingman's jet had burned in the sky, a plume of fire and smoke that was seared into her memory. That was the night she quit flying. The night she grounded herself, trading the adrenaline of the cockpit for the quiet anonymity of a desk job. Now, the radar screamed to life, pulling her back to the present. Enemy air defenses were active. Far below her, the SEAL team was depending on her to clear the way. She pushed the throttle forward. The sky erupted. Missiles streaked upwards, painting trails of light across the darkness. Sarah dodged, she dove, she twisted her jet through the deadly ballet of anti-air fire. She was clearing the path, one missile at a time. On the ground, the team was pinned down. Kane's voice crackled through her headset, strained and urgent. "We need air support. We're taking heavy fire." Her reply was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around her. "Mark the target." A single red flare shot up from the compound, a beacon in the night. Sarah banked hard, the G-force pressing her into her seat. Warnings screamed in the cockpit as enemy systems locked onto her. She didn't hesitate. Her thumb pressed the button. The strike hit its mark. The enemy position vanished in a storm of fire and debris. Soon after, the hostages were found, but the mission was far from over. Escape was now impossible. Reinforcements were closing in, cutting off their exfiltration route. The SEALs were trapped. It was Sarah who made the call. Her voice came over the radio, filled with a grim determination. "I'll open a corridor for you." She pushed her jet lower, flying straight into the teeth of the enemy's defenses. Tracers, like fiery claws, reached for her jet. A missile detonated dangerously close, and the violent shockwave shook her cockpit. For a split second, she saw her wingman's ghost in the flashing lights of her console. A fleeting image from that terrible night, and she flew straight into hell. The jet's cannons roared to life, spewing a torrent of destruction. Fire carved a path through the enemy lines, a corridor of chaos and escape. On the ground, the SEALs ran, their boots pounding the dirt. The freed hostages followed close behind. Everyone made it out. Everyone lived. At dawn, as the first light touched the horizon, Sarah climbed down from the cockpit of her jet. She was exhausted, shaken, but alive. The men who had doubted her just hours before stood silent, their faces a mixture of awe and gratitude. Captain Kane walked up to her, his expression unreadable until he spoke. "You saved us," he said simply. She just shook her head. "No, sir, we saved each other." That night, there were no celebrations, no medals, no grand speeches. There was just a quiet truth that settled over the base. Heroes don't always shout from the front lines. Sometimes, they rise quietly from the shadows when they are needed most, and in doing so, they change everything. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.